You are listening to a Core Confidence Life production. www.coreconfidencelife.com. Welcome to the program this week, the Core Confidence Life podcast. I am your host, Dennis, broadcasting to you from New York City. And on today's show, as always, we're going to be talking about confidence and self-esteem. But on today's show, we're going to be talking about confidence and self-esteem as it relates to toxic relationships. Toxic relationships. And we have a man coming on the program that's going to talk to us about his battles with low self-esteem and lack of confidence, which kept him in a toxic relationship. And he's going to share with us that journey and how he escaped it. All right, so kick back, relax, grab a beer, and let's go. Oh, wait a minute. I'm supposed to give you a disclaimer, right? We're all grown folk. I shouldn't have to give you a disclaimer, but I will. I might curse. If this is your first time listening, welcome to the program and share with your friends. I am Dennis R. Sumlin. You're listening to the Core Confidence Life podcast. And I am a coach and educator, and this program is all about helping you as a man boost that core sense of self-confidence so you could attract success on the stage, in the office, and at home. That's right. We want you to be a core self-confident man in all areas. And just doing that, you will attract the success you want just by you being you. And that's what we're talking about. So we talk about methods and stories and procedures and journeys that have to deal with men developing that self-confidence to be who they really are. So today, coming up shortly, we are talking about toxic relationships and how if you're battling low self-esteem or lack of self-confidence, you can get yourself into a toxic relationship. And we're going to hear a story about how a man who is suffering from low self-esteem, or who did suffer from low self-esteem, went through his toxic relationship and came out the other end. A lot of valuable lessons to learn from that. And so stay tuned, folks. Do you and your partner argue a lot or not communicate at all? Do you feel like you're not appreciated enough, or that your partner says things to put you down? Has the intimacy left your relationship? Are you thinking that this may not be the right relationship for you, but you don't know if you'll find another one? Well, this is not an insurmountable challenge. And the first thing that I would urge everyone to do who's listening to this, and you find yourself in the situation of a relationship that you feel is really not serving you, you feel underappreciated, put down, ignored as a man, and you're wondering if you'll find somebody else because you don't think you're worthy. And I'm telling you that that's a lie. That's a lie. And so the first step that you take is believing in your own worth. That's the first step you take. Believing in your own worth. Believing in everything that you have to offer as a person. Think about it, folks. Think of some of the things that you've done that's benefited people in your whole life. Not just whatever person you're dating right now or want to date. Think about all the things you've done for people that's benefited their life. Think about all the people that you have that care about you. Think about the good work that you do in the office, right? So it's not true that you can't find somebody else, or that nobody else will like you, love you, accept you. That's a lie. Get that lie out your mouth. So start with you and believe that you are worth it. You are worthy because you are a human that's done good things on the planet. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. Because one of the things I hate witnessing is people who know that they're in a toxic relationship but just don't think they can do any better. And so I'm here to tell you that you can. Right? So if you need a little help with understanding who you are, understanding your worth as a man, and how to get treated better by people and partners and friends, let's talk. So contact me, Dennis at coreconfidencelife.com, Dennis at coreconfidencelife.com, and we'll have a conversation about amping your relationships up, right? The Authentic Man program, I want to help you amp your relationship up. I want to help you amp your confidence up. Right. And now it's time for a little story of toxic treachery. It's been an interesting summer, says Andy Driskle, who is on the program today to share with us what his summer was like as he broke up with his girlfriend of 3.5 years. Mr. Driskle is here to talk about his battles with low self-esteem and depression and how that kept him in a toxic relationship. He's going to be sharing his ups and downs with his relationship, how he made it through it, and how he got out. We have Andy Driskle with us here, and he's going to share some experiences, some ups and some downs when it comes to self-esteem, self-worth, and dealing with the ups and downs of relationships and just life in general as a man. What's going on, Andy?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, it's been an interesting summer, to say the least.
So an interesting summer. So what has this summer been like for you? What's so interesting about it? Tell us.
Well, it kind of led off in early July. I split up with my girlfriend of about 3.5 years, and kind of as the summer progressed, I realized how toxic that relationship was, more than I ever even really thought of at the time. I have struggled my whole life with self-esteem issues and more recently depression. And, it's like I knew the relationship wasn't working. And the more like I think about it, the more I've realized how I've taken a huge step back this summer with my self-worth and how I feel about myself. And so much of it stemmed because of that relationship. And in the grand scheme of things, the breakup will hopefully be a good thing. But so the summer's just been a real struggle to try and kind of come to terms with that and get grips of it and kind of get out from underneath that cloud that, when you have self-esteem issues, that kind of just looms over you.
Yeah, definitely. I want to get back into the specifics of the relationship a little later, but I want to go back because you mentioned that you suffered with self-esteem issues for most of your life, at least. So take us back to the first time or the first instances that you've noticed or that it's shown up that you have some struggles there.
I would probably say it went all the way back to like junior high school.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a neighborhood where there was very few kids. It was basically just me and my sister. And my parents were kind of kids are seen, not heard. So I had no real voice. I was very introverted, which people don't believe now when they talk to me. But all the way up through high school, I was very in a shell, which again, trying to look at the grand scheme of things, I think, I'm an artist, and in high school I was into music and theater, and so I feel like those were good avenues for me, and that's probably how I became a creative person, because it was an outlet for me. But at the time, it's so overwhelming and almost takes over your life, where you just feel like you don't have a voice. You feel like no one's interested in what you have to say, that you don't have anything worth saying, that what you have to say isn't serious or real, and that your feelings aren't valid. So that's probably where it started, was like in junior high. And then, that steamrolls into other parts of your life where, like adolescence is hard enough, but then, you add hormones and being interested in girls and trying to talk to girls when you don't feel like they should be talking to you. It was a very, very trying time for me.
So what are some instances that you've gone through, maybe specifically, where maybe you spoke to a female, but you didn't really feel like you should? And how did you eventually, end up, I guess, maybe eventually having sex or having a girlfriend or making some friends? So how did the process of getting a girl and getting friends go for you, starting from that standpoint?
So starting kind of in junior high school, I would have like one friend each year. It just happened to be someone who was, proximity wise close to me, that, they sat next to me in homeroom, or, we had a class together. And it kind of stayed that way through junior high, where I had like one friend each year, and girlfriends didn't even come into the picture until like late high school. And then once I got into high school, like I said, I played music. I was in the marching band, and that helped me become used to having friends. That's where like my friends came. I still have friends from marching band in high school. And that helped me come out of my shell a little bit. And that's kind of the weird thing is, I've always been in band. I've been performing in theater groups when I was younger. I don't have a problem being on stage talking in front of people. But at the time, talking to one person one-on-one was just horrible. It was devastating. And forget if I actually was, romantically interested in a girl, then talking to her was impossible. And then I think I fell into that thing that a lot of people in that situation end up in, where you become interested in a girl, and so you become friends, but you never kind of, cross that line. You never make an advance, so you end up in, it's kind of cliche, but you end up in the friend zone.
Yeah.
And and so it was a really big struggle, and man, it was a long time. Any girlfriend I had in high school kind of made an advance on me, not the other way around. And it was more just, and even to this day, it's a bit of a struggle for me to kind of like make that transition from him just having a conversation to expressing my interest.
Okay, so let's stay there for a second here. When you said
Sure.
that the girls made advances to you, and that's kind of how it went back then. So what was your reaction when they made advances towards you?
There was kind of like a feeling that, it was unreal, or, you just kind of went, I rolled with the punches, and kind of went from there. And somehow I managed to get myself a girlfriend, but I think I only had like I had two girlfriends in high school. One probably like sophomore year. And then, a girl asked me to the senior prom, and we ended up together for a long time. So even to this day, I kind of look back and be like, how did I get from like point A to into a relationship? And I still don't really understand how that, like where that turns. That's always been a struggle for me.
Okay. So was it like for most people, I guess, how was it for you your first time? Being that you're shy, low self-esteem, all that stuff, and they had to make the moves on you. So how was that first time experience for you?
Very awkward. And, by that point, all my friends had sex. So it was almost embarrassing to say that I had sex, because I knew it was going to be a big deal. And, like when you have self-esteem issues, you just want to like roll under the radar. You don't want to be called out for anything good or anything bad.
Yeah.
Like, just don't, So, I remember somehow it came up at a party, and, my friends, were meaning to be supportive and being like, hey, good for you. And at the time, just like, oh, Jesus, what? Just no, just don't, forget it. Just, let's move on. So yeah, like on an individual one-on-one basis, I had trouble, kind of being the center of attention too, because like that's just, you don't feel like you should be.
Mm-hmm. So bring us forward past high school, past college, or whatever, and now you're out in the world. You're a grown man. So how is this working for your low self-esteem as when it comes to that when you move into manhood?
So
did it have an effect on your job, your career? Did it have an effect on you looking for work? Anything like that?
Strangely, I've never had an issue with it in work. I've always had a really good work ethic, and have always, like, work was the one thing I could just do. That never, somehow I could separate that from my self-esteem, and it was totally different. And so that's never really been an issue for me. So I've always, had a fairly easy time getting jobs. When I get jobs, I usually get promoted relatively quickly. At one point I was running, I worked in a merchandising in retail. I had a team of 30 people. I never really even really thought about it. It was just kind of the job. It was almost like I just did the job. It wasn't me. I was just doing a thing. So it was kind of separate from my self-esteem issues.
So the job was like a function. It's like, this is not me. So this is kind of like a compartmentalized part of what I got to do. This is the job. You got to earn money. You got to work or whatever. This is what I like to do anyway. So let's just, separate.
Yeah, it was almost like I'm just following instructions. Like it was separate from me because I'm just, these are the instructions, follow them, do your job. Yeah. And so it somehow, and I've never even really thought about it until just now, like it just doesn't weigh into my self-worth. My self-worth doesn't weigh into it. And it just kind of, I just roll with the punches, and I just do the job, and,
Okay.
So, it's strange. I never really thought about how little that they affected each other.
Yeah. So we've gone to talk about your self-esteem problems since you've been in junior high, and you started off the program talking about this past relationship playing into your self-esteem challenges and actually maybe making them a little worse. So tell me more about the dynamics of this relationship. How did you meet her? How did y'all end up, staying together for all this time? And then what happened from there,
Okay. Well, let me kind of lead into that with what led to that. I had actually gotten married at one point, gotten divorced. That's kind of when the depression kicked off. So I went to therapy and really worked on myself. Really realized that, that whole marriage, I was never really happy. It was, the girl I went to the senior prom with, it was just kind of comfortable. I didn't feel confident that if I wasn't with her, I'd be able to be with someone else. So, the marriage, fell apart because I don't even know if my heart was in it. And so I got divorced, really depressed, went through some boatloads of therapy, and got some really good friends who were very supportive, and was starting to feel better about myself. And I met this woman who I worked with, was probably divorced 5 or 6 years at this point, maybe a little more. Like I said, I had no problem getting a job and getting promoted. So I was kind of on a fast track where they wanted me to kind of move up in the company. So, we started dating, and, like every relationship, things are great in the beginning.
Of course.
And then, and then as things progressed, it was more like everything I did wasn't right or wasn't good enough. And she would be very passive about things that she asked for. We ended up moving in together, and just kind of as an example of that, it took me a good year. to understand. She'd be like, oh, I really got to trim those hedges. And to me, that means, okay, well, you got that taken care of. And it took me a year to be like, when she says, I really need to, it means you need to. And so then when I would do those things, it was never quite right. And she would be happy about it, or I'd do it on the wrong day. And it just seemed like every little thing, like there was never like, oh, thanks, that's really great. And so it was so gradual and so subtle that it wasn't like she would be like, you're an asshole, you did this wrong. It was more subtle than that. So it just kind of slid under the radar and slowly built up and slowly built up. And it got to the point where it was almost the point where I didn't want to do anything because I feel like, well, she's going to be angry at me regardless. So why waste the time of doing it? So yeah, it was a pretty big struggle.
So how long were you with her? You said 3 years?
Yeah, about 3.5 years.
Okay.
And that was kind of the beginning of the downfall. There were other issues that, in retrospect I look at and I'm like, wow, that just is such a weird thing that happened and was clearly eating at me that I just never picked up on.
So what were the things that made you stay with her? I'm always curious about when people are in turbulent relationships and they may not know all the problems, but they know that there's some weird things happening and this is a little bumpy. So what made you stay with her for all that time?
Well, a few things. One, like at the time, it never seemed turbulent. There were never like plates being thrown. There was never fights. There was never huge arguments. It was more passive digs and, quietly sitting and ignoring me at dinner and looking at her phone. And, it was more subtle and kind of crept in, it was like,
well, passive aggressive type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. When we were dating, it was like, I always had her attention. And then, I'd be like, oh, well, I guess one night, she wasn't in a good mood, whatever. I understand, that happened. And then next thing you know, you're sitting on the couch being like, I can't remember the last time we've had a conversation, so it creeps in there and such a, I don't know if you heard of the science experiment where if you put a frog in boiling water, they immediately jump out. But if you slowly turn up the temperature, it stays in and will boil to death.
Yeah. Once they realize it, it's too late. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that slow cooker that suddenly you're like, son of a bitch, I'm the frog boiling to death. How did that happen?
Yeah.
So it's just this creep, the slow creep that, suddenly it's, I'm not saying we never had arguments. And one of the last arguments, I'm like, I told her, I'm like, I feel like a servant because it's, this list of things that I have to do and God forbid I forget anything or God forbid I, have a beer and sit and watch TV and leave the beer can sitting on the end table or, just forget about something. Then and it's not even like a screaming match. It's just this, you left this sitting by the couch and been like, oh, okay. It was more passive. It was more subtle and just constant. And it just really wears on you because to me it's like if I see, oh hey, you left some dishes in the sink, I'll wash them, I'll put them away, put them in the dishwasher, whatever. Like I never felt the need to kind of like go and correct behavior. It was just like, oh, I got it.
So when was the moment you said, okay, this is not going to work? The moment that you realized that the water has already been boiling and this is not going to work.
That would have been in December. That's when it that's the only time it really got nasty. And it wasn't an argument. It was more just a comment and it was just soul crushing. And, she was always, I'm not a shirt and tie, dress pants kind of guy. I'm a jeans and t-shirt. I'm a creative person, so I just march to the beat of my own drummer. And one thing that always drove her crazy was I have jeans. They're a little long, so the ends of the jeans get a little ratty, and it just drove her crazy. And so around Christmas, she had, so for my Christmas present from her was jeans that were shorter. And I'm like, all right. And she was, like, did you try them on? Did you try them on? Did you try them on? So finally, I tried them on, whatever, wore them to work and came home. She's like, oh, how did you like them? And I'm like, they're nice. I appreciate them, but, they feel weird because I feel like my ankles are hanging out because that's not normally how I wear my jeans. And the mood in the room, like, changed immediately. And I think I was making dinner at the time. And suddenly she's like, I don't know why we're together. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, we're just too different, this, that, and the other thing. And the moment where I'm like, I don't even, like, it was just like being hit with a brick, was she said that when I dress the way I normally do, that it reflects poorly on her. And it was just devastating, having self-esteem issues, it was just devastating.
Yeah.
And that's when I'm like, this is fucked up. Like, what? And I didn't even know what to say. I just walked out of the room. And then, like, 20 minutes later, like, she came in to, like, give me a hug. And I'm like, don't hug me. Like, I'm like, I don't even, like, I don't know what to say. I don't know if I want to talk to you. And it took me weeks to even kind of pull my shit together enough to even have a conversation with her about it.
So, but yet you started out by saying, so the summer is when you finally ended it.
The summer, yeah. The summer is when it was just like, no, this is officially done.
Okay.
Why it took another 5-6 months? Again, frog in the boiling water. I don't know. I think it was a little comfortable. Didn't have a, escape plan or whatever, but it's just like.
So between December and the summer, when now it's boiling, now things probably aren't really going to go very far. What was the day-to-day like? Did you stop talking to her? Was less or zero sex? Was there no going out? Like what routines in the relationship deteriorated, if any?
Well, the sex tapered off, like, pretty gradually towards the end. There was obviously none.
Yeah.
But again, I think it was that, she hit that right chord of self-esteem where it was just like, I reflect poorly on her. And then it was just like, what choice do I have? I felt stuck. Like, who else is going to want me?
Oh.
She doesn't even want me, So it almost kind of felt like, do I leave? Can I leave? What do I do? Do I want to be alone? So it was really tough. And the thing that is really, like, eating at me, and, like, the toughest thing that this summer has really developed is that feeling of, wow, she was ashamed of me the whole time we were dating. And that's really what's been devastating. And so then you start to look back, and you said something about, oh, did you not go out? And I'm like, man, it was like a year and a half to get her out of the house was like, an act of Congress. You had to, like, convince her to go out. And it's like, it wasn't that she was a homebody and didn't want to go out. It's she didn't want to go out with me. And then, then you start kind of, like, looking back at conversations, and then, like, she never once referred to me as her boyfriend. It was always her friend, roommate one time. That was, like, devastating. I have only met one family member of hers. Like, she never introduced me to people. Never let me in as part of her life. And then, so I kind of look back at that and go, I can't believe, like, that whole time I never realized that she was keeping me separate from everything else because she was ashamed to be with me, and that does not help your self-esteem.
No, it doesn't. I'm trying to, to be honest, I'm trying to keep my composure here, because this is
pretty fucked up.
Telling me the stuff that she's doing. I'm over here. I'm just going, what?
Yeah.
What? I just
thankfully I have some good friends that I can kind of vent to and talk about. And some of them are friends also with her because, you know, I'm a very busy, active person. Like I said, people wouldn't believe that I used to be an introvert because I'm very active in the community. But, you know, they're like, what is she talking about? Like, why would you reflect poorly on her? And they're like, that's ridiculous. And, you know, how could she be ashamed to be with you? She, you know, you guys have been together 3 years. Like, why is that coming up now? And I'm like, you know, I don't know. And so it's been a real struggle. And
this is interesting. I want to know, okay, so now you see all these things in 2020 hindsight that you didn't really realize before. So do you know, I don't, maybe a question you can't answer, but it's certainly a question that I have when I hear about these kind of dysfunctional relationships. So now that you know all the elements that were going on, why do you think you didn't know it then? Because dude, maybe I should be more. Why? Because when she's not including you, I mean, presumably you know that you didn't meet her family. I know it's subconscious, but
right.
What?
But I think at the time, it's one instance. You know, her family's out of state, so it would be like, oh well, I'm going home to visit family, and you'd be like, oh, okay. And so the first time you're like, well, you know, we haven't been together that long, so I wouldn't expect an invitation. Okay. And then the next time she's going home for someone's birthday, and you're like, well, someone's birthday, whatever, that, you know, or some family reunion, all right, whatever. Yeah. And then, so it's like one instance. So
yeah, they're all coming off as a series of, basically they're all coming off as a series of one-offs.
Right. So then, like, when you step back, you go, oh, shit, that wasn't a one-off, that was a pattern.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's almost, you know, hard to see the whole pattern unless you sit down and kind of like make notes. Like, oh, there's a clear pattern here.
And I'm sure like the same thing would be my guess. Yeah, I'm sure the same thing applied to when I guess you wanted to go out and she didn't want to go. Maybe there was a oh, I'm tired today, or I was working all day today, or we just went out yesterday, or something like that, where you thought it was a situational thing. Okay.
And she, you know, she was always like, well, you know, I mean, when we started dating, she's like, you know, I have some anxiety issues, so sometimes going out is hard for me. And I'm like, okay, I understand that. Okay. And so sometimes she'd be like, oh, you know, I don't want to go out tonight. You know, I'm not really feeling it. And you'd be like, all right, that's cool. And it would just be, you know, in the beginning, like once a month. And then it was like twice a month. And then it was like once a week that she wouldn't go out. And then, you know, and so like that amount just kind of crept up slowly. And suddenly you're like, I can't remember the last time we went out together. And, you know, I had friends at the time. They'd be like, why are you guys still together? And I'm like, well, we had fun when we went out to such and such. You know, we had a really good time. And it's just those good times became fewer and far between. And, you know, it's that slow creep.
Yeah. No, I definitely see the dynamics, understand the dynamics. Wow. Okay. So you're here today out of the situation. So how do you feel right now as far as self-esteem? You said she kind of damaged it a little bit. Where do you stand now?
Yeah, it's still pretty bad. That whole, you know, being with someone for 3.5 years and then realizing that 3.5 years, or at least a big portion of that they're ashamed to be with you. And that's not the thing. It's not that, oh, I don't want to be with you anymore. It's the fact that you had shame that you didn't want people to know we were together. That's been devastating.
Ooh.
Because, you know, it's like, you know, no one's perfect. I'm far from perfect. You know, I'm not going to even, you know, pretend like I'm even close. But I feel like I said, I'm really involved in the community, and I have people who thank me on a regular basis for, you know, the things that I do. I actually went on a date a couple weeks ago, and it's to the point where, and this is a little bit of a humble brag, where like I walk down the street and every 2, 3 blocks, someone stops me and be like, hey man, what's going on? How you doing? I haven't seen you in a while, blah, blah. And the girl I was on a date with, she's like, does that happen all the time? I'm like, yeah, it kind of, you know, it's a very small pond that I happen to be a medium-sized fish in. And so it's like, I don't understand like why someone would be ashamed of someone who has a reasonably good reputation. Like to me, that's how I look at it. And it just seems so weird and disconnected. So it's hard to kind of wrap my head around.
Yeah.
But that feeling part comes in and pushes out the logical thinking. And it's like, well, she was ashamed to be with you. So clearly there's something wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was my next question. Good. So you started dating again.
Yeah.
Cool.
Just recently.
Okay.
Which I hate.
You hate the dating scene?
Yeah, man. It's like when you have, low self-esteem, it's hard to approach women.
Yeah.
And
Tell me about it.
And then as you get older, I'm 43. So it's just like, it almost feels like the good ones are taken.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but, you start dating some people and you're like, oh, you're single. And they're like, yeah. And you start being like, why are you single? And then you date them for a little while and you're like, oh, I get it. I get why you're single.
Yeah.
So I've had some real interesting dates in the past, but, I'm trying to just be out there and trying to stay positive.
Yeah. All right. So talked about a lifetime of a low self-esteem and things that may have damaged it. Have you ever done anything directly to try to improve your own self-esteem, or you just kind of riding this thing wave?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I did a lot of therapy, and
yes, you said therapy. Mm-hmm.
I have built up a really good, close-knit group of friends that I can go to and talk to. And the whole point of this call was to kind of talk it out, get a outside opinion. And I feel, like I said, I'm active in the community, in the arts, and the stuff that I've done there, it feels really good to do that stuff. Feels a little weird when people give me credit for things because I have low self-esteem. So I'm like, oh, I didn't really do anything. And they're like, no, you did this whole thing. But I've hosted art shows with almost 200 pieces in it, and people make a big deal about it. And that kind of little, kid comes back out where, that's like, don't point to the things that I have done positive because it makes me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, I try, I just, the way that I look at it now is I try to surround myself with good people, and I try to have fun, and I try to enjoy what I'm doing. Hopefully the rest will kind of,
all right,
take care of itself. And prior to going into this relationship, my self-esteem was probably higher than it had ever been. And hopefully I'll get back to that point, which I'm trying to work towards, but it's just like, it was a real kick in the balls.
Yeah, definitely. Look, I've had low self-esteem, lack of self-confidence, and actually the lack of self-confidence was more about me ignoring my own abilities and intrinsic sense of confidence and second guessing myself based on other people's views. So it actually was more, I actually have and had intrinsic confidence, and people pick that up from my voice. But for most of my life, I've ignored my own intrinsic confidence and paid attention to everybody else's yappings and being liked by everybody else and blah, 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 blah. And so when they tell me, oh, you're confident, you're this, I am, because I'm too busy paying attention to other people, like putting myself second.
I had someone tell me just the other day that I was the most confident person they've ever met.
You see that?
And I'm like, what are you talking about? And it's because of, the activities I'm involved in. And the one thing that I've started to do that has really helped me, I went out, I'm a paper and pen kind of calendar guy. Like, I can't use an app. It just doesn't work for me. But I went out and got a calendar a few years ago, and I schedule activities. And if an opportunity presents itself, I don't think about it. I just like, yeah, we'll take part in that. We'll do that. And it has just steamrolled into all sorts of different, avenues. I'm working with, groups here in the town, and it keeps me busy. It keeps me motivated. It keeps me positive because I don't have time to like really sit and fester, And I think part of this, what made this summer so bad for me, is when I moved out, I gave myself like a good 2 weeks to kind of get everything moved and accustomed. So I didn't really have anything going on for 2 weeks other than sitting and festering and wallowing in my self-pity. And things are starting to kind of come back because I'm getting back to my schedule. I'm booking more appointments and I'm staying busy. So I think for me personally, downtime is not a good thing.
So what would you say to other people who are living with low self-esteem, lack of confidence? What kind of words would you tell them to try to get them to kind of move forward, help them out a little bit? Some tips.
Some of the things that have kind of helped me is, asking positive questions instead of the why does it happen to me? Why doesn't she love me? What did I do wrong? Because your brain's going to be like, well, she doesn't love you because you're a piece of shit or you're not good enough. Be like, well, what do I try to ask positive things? What do I have to look forward to? What good things do I have to offer? And believe me, that's easier said than done because I don't do it all the time. But I try to focus on those questions. What do I have to offer? What have I improved about myself? And your brain will then answer the questions in a positive way, like, oh, you're good at this, or you're a kind person, or you're a good listener, or whatever it happens to be. It's when you start to kind of just beat up on yourself with those negative questions that I think just kind of snowballs, and it's very hard to kind of break that cycle.
Good. That's a good tip. Asking yourself, what's good about me? What am I offering?
Right.
And one thing that
and sometimes you got to ask someone else because you're not in the place where you can answer it.
Definitely.
But that's why I have friends to ask those questions to.
There's another tip: having good, supportive friends around you that you can trust their feedback and bond with them. One thing that stuck out about your story as far as improving your self-esteem is you mentioned early on that you kind of disconnected yourself from work, where the work was instructional and you didn't even factor that into your low self-esteem. And I'm thinking if you lived more connected to everything you're doing, the good parts about you would be more clear. So for example, maybe you shined at work, but because you were disconnected and didn't factor that into you as a person, all those achievements probably went unnoticed.
Right. They didn't feel like achievements. It was just work.
Yeah, it was just work. And if you just live, live connected to everything, live as a whole person, don't disconnect yourself from experiences, you can see much more of who you are in a positive light and see much more of your personality and personhood with more depth. And you'll have more things to draw on too, as far as good. You'll have more things to draw on.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to kind of be mindful to do that.
Yeah, because what's the big deal? You at work and you at home, you're not separate people. You're the same person.
Right.
So when you go to work, you're still the same person. You're using your skills. You're using your brain. You're using even if it is kind of like even if it is a desk job. Maybe some people aren't as good with filing details as you are. Like, if you connect yourself to all your tasks, you'll see even more tasks that you're good at and more things you have to offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that importance of celebrating what you do well and not dwelling on your mistakes or your shortcomings.
Absolutely. Well, you know what?
Or your perceived shortcomings.
You perceive, exactly. Question whether those are shortcomings or not, or whether it's just someone else's opinion. There's a difference between your shortcomings and someone else's opinion.
Right.
We all have shortcomings. No one's perfect. But just keep in mind, if someone says something to you or you hear something about you, say, is that a shortcoming of mine that I've seen before, or is it just someone's opinion?
Right. Yeah, that's very good advice.
Yeah. And if it is a genuine shortcoming, you don't have to wallow in it. Look at it, look for improvement. Okay, I made a mistake here. What could I learn from this mistake?
Right.
So even if you do see things about you that are not perfect, you don't look at them in a positive way. How could I use this to improve myself? What could I learn from this? how could I use this trait in a more positive way versus negative?
Yeah, and it's funny is like the real shortcomings, I don't think fuck me up as much as the perceived vague ones.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes I'm absent-minded and be like, well, yeah, I got a lot of stuff on my mind. I always try to make notes and blah, blah, but hey, that thing kind of happens. Opposed to the you're not good enough, which is so vague, and that's the
exactly
that's the big bad one that
that's a vague.
It's where your brain shuts off and you're feeling
Yep, and that's and saying that you're not good enough. That's clearly you're taking that you're not good enough on because of someone else. That's not an original.
Right.
You didn't come up with that on your own. That I'm not good enough. That's coming from the outside. Versus,
right, and it's also something that's so abstract it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's
because
good enough
what,
for like it's
what measure?
Yeah.
Yeah, what measure of where am I on the good scale? There is no such thing. It's just this amorphous, just feeling, and not an actual
absolutely
hard thought.
Whereas the shortcoming that you pointed out that you think is concrete, as in you have a forgetful mind, you could do something about that. Like you said, take notes, have a calendar. That's something you can actually do something about, so it won't be as much of a hindrance.
Mm-hmm.
That's not, and so that's how you can differentiate what's coming from the outside and what's coming from actually me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. I never really thought about that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, you can when you think about stuff and you check where things are coming from, you'll be able to find out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hopefully, I think tomorrow's the first day of fall, so I'm looking forward to big things in the fall. The summer's over. I can, go away now and gonna try and move forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, this has been a great conversation. Very interesting. My temperature always goes up anytime I hear about dysfunctional relationships and people who are mistreated in them. It drives me nuts. It's not like I haven't been in my own crazy relationship. I have.
Right. And that's the other thing is like, I'm a human being. I know I wasn't perfect. I know I did things wrong in the relationship.
Yeah.
But it's just, that's how it is.
Yeah. 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 Even though I've been in my own kind of cuckoo relationship, sometimes it's one of those things I hear a man going through some crazy relationship and it just, wow. But it's very interesting. And I think that that's a confident act, by the way, coming on the air and sharing your challenges, your vulnerability. I know that's a controversial word nowadays, the V word.
Yeah.
But let's change it. Being transparent. Using your own struggle to maybe help other men out there to make it through these things, or maybe someone identifies with you. Oh, I'm not the only one. That alone, in and of itself, is helpful.
Yeah, and even just your perspective. I mean, we've talked about a few things, and I'm like, I've never looked at it that way before. Even some of the things that I said, I'm like, I've just never really sat down and thought about it like that way before. So sometimes it even just helps saying it out loud to someone else.
Yes.
Who, someone like yourself that I don't even know. It's, your friends are always going to be there, be like, oh, you're a good guy. And you're like, you're my friend. You're always going to say that.
I thought about that. Yeah, absolutely. There was a time that I was feeling a little low, whatever. And at that moment, a friend calling me up, telling me good things wasn't going to help me. I'm like, of course you're going to say that. I needed someone who didn't know me very well to call me up. And they did. And they don't have a reason to gas. Not that my friends do, but when you're in that low of a moment, you're thinking of every excuse to stay low.
Exactly. You're trying to stay there. You're trying to, I don't want to say enjoy it, but kind of like soak it in. Like it's part of the process, kind of, where you're like, you got to feel bad so you can feel good again. But it's a trick to not stay there. Yeah,
it's a trick not to allow that negative feeling to actually just kind of normalize that negative feeling.
Yeah, right.
You could become so depressed where you think it's normal. That happened to me.
Yep. So,
Cool.
so thanks for listening.
Oh, definitely, man. No, this is great stuff. I'm glad that you're able to come on and talk about this stuff. These are very important issues. These are issues that happen every day. A lot of relationships are going through similar things, and people aren't going to know until the end sometimes. And hopefully, they can catch it while it's happening. So.
Right. Well, hopefully, it helps some of your listeners, and I'd be more than happy to check back in on occasion and let you know how my dating life is going.
Hey, well, that'll be cool, man. That will be definitely cool. Yeah. I would definitely be interested in hearing more about that as time goes on. So cool, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, bro.
No problem, man. Thanks so much.
You just don't have to put up with sub-respectful treatment. You just don't have to. There's a difference between being understanding and just not valuing yourself. So, there you have it, folks. You've been listening to Core Confidence Life. I'm your host, Dennis R. Sumlin. Feel free to visit the website at www.coreconfidencelife.com. That's www.coreconfidencelife.com. Contact me directly at dennis@coreconfidencelife.com, telling you if you are in a toxic relationship and you know that this is not where you need to be. You put yourself first and contact me. Let's talk about it. The Authentic Man Program, right? Let's talk about it. Let's see if I can help you help yourself